Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. What is the deal with Alpha Records in France? I really am puzzled and curious and intrigued by what they've been doing lately. I have to tell you the story, and then you'll see where I'm coming from. French labels have always been a little bit mysterious. Back in the day when I used to go to the MIDEM convention in the 90s and the early 2000s, the French labels usually had their special stands, and they would lock themselves in the door behind their special stands and whisper to each other in French, and then they'd pop out and tell us how wonderful they were and then retreat back into their inner sanctum. I mean, no one really was quite sure what was going on with them. They had interesting relationships with various artists and artistic organizations in the French military, industrial, cultural superstructure, and you never quite knew what was going on. But, they somehow survived by merging and remerging, and things popped up and they changed their names every 5 minutes. Remember, there was Astray and Ovidis, then Ovidis Astray, then Naive Ovidis Astray, and I don't get it. I mean, I don't have any idea, what the infrastructure over there was, and how they did. And Alpha popped up as this independent label, a small independent label dedicated specifically to early music and French Baroque music. And I remember the first time I met with the Alpha people. I don't remember what their names were or anything, but the managing director sat down with me and said, "Do they play Baroque music in America?" And I just looked at him like, huh? Because I was holding a disc of his featuring Skip Sempe, harpsichordist or whatever he plays. And on the back of it, it said, sponsored by funding from the New York Council for the Arts. And I waved this at him and said, well, where did this come from? Very interesting. And how did they get a hold of it? Of course, I didn't realize at the time that the entire model for financing and releasing recordings was changing. These record labels don't pay for anything anymore. Artists find the funding or other organizations and bring the project to the label, and then the label will issue it after being paid to do so. That's how it sort of works these days now. Record labels don't have budgets for making records. They get paid to distribute the records that other people make. How much of that is going on with Alpha, I don't know. But they did all kinds of French Baroque stuff. I mean, so much so that they have this reissue series of essential Baroque things. And I just pulled out a pile of them just to sort of tell you what they were doing. It's strange music, stuff you never heard of. Busset. I mean, this is Je meurs sans mourir. I die without dying. It's very French. And, and it's got, let's see, he lived from 1587 to 1643. And this is with Le Poème Harmonique under Vincent Dumestre. It's like people you never heard of. Le Berger Poète, the shepherd poet, with Les Musiciens de Saint-Julien under François Lazarevich. Suites and sonatas for flute and musette by various people, Philidor and Chedeville and Hotteterre and Rebel, who wrote Les Éléments. It's like, oh yeah, all this very, very French and very Baroque. Louis Couperin with Skip Sempe, there he is. Was this funded by the New York Council for the Arts? I don't know, but probably. Who knows? Dowland lute songs with French people doing those. Haydn flute sonatas with Juliette Hurel and Hélène Couvert. And there they are. There's a bunch of them. These are after quartets. They turned them into flute sonatas, which is kind of interesting. Marine Marais, of course, Les Folies d'Espagne and Le Labyrinthe and other things with Ensemble Spirale, the Spiral Ensemble, and Marianne Muller. So that was interesting. And the Bach French suites with Blandine Ranou. I mean, that's just an example. All this stuff. And then, of course, they started doing those Bach concertos with Cafe Zimmermann, which were wonderful, absolutely marvelous. And they had beautiful recorded sound, and they also were interested in like production, which had its pluses and minuses, right? They're doing the complete Haydn symphonies. And they did those Mozart symphonies with Minasi, I think. Was that Alpha? Probably. Who knows? Anyway, then like strange little, because the model for record labels doing these things was not one where they had an A&R department and paid for their own stuff. Things would come out that were kind of anomalous. Alpha was the first label to promote Theodor Korensis, you may recall. They did his Shostakovich 14th Symphony, which was excellent, and a Mozart Requiem, and, one or two other things. And then, of course, he jumped ship immediately and found, another label, and then, all sorts of other things happened. So there were those odd things that were strange because they were outside their Fach, outside their usual repertoire preferences. And then, there was that coming, and we've got this started showing up. This is marvelous, by the way. The complete Schumann piano music with Eric Lesage, which is first rate, and the complete Schumann chamber music with piano with Eric Lesage and friends. Beautiful editions. They never got much promotion, at least here. I mean, of course, nothing gets promoted here, but, maybe in France. I have no idea. Eric Lesage is a wonderful pianist. And the Schumann stuff is absolutely terrific. No one talks about it, which is interesting. So they must have had funding to do some of these larger projects. And now I see, I'm just looking around here, what shows up? Well, there are peculiar releases of like Grieg and Saint-Saëns piano concertos. That's sitting here somewhere. But they're doing a Shostakovich cycle. They're doing a Mahler cycle with Paavo Järvi. They've become like a major label. And I'm not sure whether it's because they're accepting projects that nobody else would accept and just issuing them and they don't care because it doesn't cost them anything, or they're really behind this and there is some sort of, evil genius who is plotting their eventual, transformation into, a major label. They are a major label in the world of classical music, but a quiet one. It seems few people are mentioning them. But I have here, and we'll be reviewing shortly, Shostakovich 4 and 5. Wait a minute, it's like sitting right here. Right, there it is. Here it is, wrapped in plastic, but I'm going to listen to it very shortly. With the Frankfurt Radio Symphony and Alain Altinoglu, who we know is very, very fine conductor. He's done some Franck for them, right? And then they've got René Jacob doing Haydn's Missa Chilensis, which is a wonderful piece, with the Kammer Orchestra Basel. They're all over the place. All of a sudden, the universe is looking alphabetical. So I'm very, very curious to know what's going on with them and following their progress with great curiosity, because they seem now to have, evolved from being just a sort of specialty boutique Baroque label doing, repertoire that people never heard of in the United States, even though it's funded by the United States, to a general label doing all the big blockbuster repertoire. So go figure. It's really kind of interesting. And at a time when everybody else is tanking and retrenching and doing, as little as possible, Alpha is expanding and growing. And that's anomalous. And I find anomalies fascinating. So let's keep our eyes out and see what's going on with this most interesting and mysterious label from France. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.